hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Experience in ECAC podcast. I'm your host, Billy Pickens, ECAC's Youth Outreach Coordinator, and I'm joined by my good friend and member of our Youth Advisory team, Maya Warren. Maya, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Billy. It's another day,
That's
another
right.
episode.
That's right. Another day, another episode, a warm day. Um, and it's interesting that I asked how you were. Before we get into it, I want to say that this podcast is brought to you by ECAC, North Carolina's Parent Training and Information Center, where we empower families and improve lives. And we thank ECAC for giving us this platform, especially today, because today we're going to be talking about something near and dear to both of our hearts, I believe. And it's interesting that I asked how you were because today we're going to be talking about mental health and our mental health journey. And so with that said, um, Maya, do you have any interesting statistics about mental health or anything you'd like to share? Did I lose you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I got you
Sorry.
now.
So, with mental health, one of the things that I've kind of been focusing on in my, research and advocacy, is the impact that mental health plays on the lives of those who have a disability and or chronic illness. And people with disabilities and chronic illness are about four times as likely to struggle with some sort of mental health component, whether it be depression, anxiety, and etc.
Hmm. What do you think are some? I share what I think in a minute. But what do you think are some reasons for that, based on your research?
So actually, it's funny you asked me that. I did a video last week, I believe, where I talk about some of the many contributing factors as to why um, there's an exponential comparison regarding mental health for us, and some of the things include like the battles that we may go through with the medical system, i.e., insurance. You know, the cancellation or certain institutions getting rid of coverage for different medications or
Yes.
technologies that would help illness or disability. Then you look at um, different layers, the different types of ableism. So there's structural ableism that has to do with the way that buildings and the infrastructure of society is established. So buildings, whether they have like a narrow passageway or a wide passageway that gives leeway for people who utilize wheelchairs, or hospital facilities or medical facilities that have different modalities for people who deal with sensory overload. So, looking at that, those are contributing factors. And then another big one is transportation.
Yes.
So, not being able to drive or have limited access to being able to drive and depending on public transportation, whether that be Lyft or Uber or cab services. And even with things like Lyft and Uber, there's only so far you can go on that because it's quite expensive, especially when
Thank
you're a person
you.
with the disability. I mean, literally, sometimes you can go across town and it'll be $40 one way. So imagine spending $80 just to perform one task in
Exactly.
one day. It really racks up. And when you get into Social Security income, it doesn't really allow for mobility in that regard. So those are just some of the things, Billy.
No, that whoa, we could do a whole 2 hour episode with that. That's a lot to unpack there. But I really want to touch on what you said. With just the societal struggles and especially the transportation, especially for me, being totally blind, progressive hearing loss, so obviously not being able to drive myself places. Um, but I really love because I feel like that's something that a lot of people fail to understand because people ask all the time, what are some ways I can get out more, and they're always saying, well, I can use Lyft and Uber, and I'm like, I could, but that that's really, a lot of. I mean, I make a decent income, but it's like, you just do that 3 times a week and you already spent $100 plus. Just going to
Mhm.
the store and back or something like that. Um, and not to mention, like, people don't want to be alone. Like, people don't want to. Yeah, sure, I could go places by myself, but like, I don't always go places by myself. Um, and so I think it's a big struggle, to find connection, and it's like I feel like a lot of times, I think that I understand to some degree that it's difficult for some people to want to include other people because they don't understand how to include them, or they look at their disability as, well, I shouldn't, I don't know how to do this. This is, weird to me, whatever. But it's like, I don't know, it makes it a lot more difficult when you're kind of, really fighting in a way to be accepted in society as a person with disability. And I think even that alone can really weigh on one's mental health.
Mhm.
And really just finding yourself. Like, I know for me, and we talk a little bit about our journeys in mental health. I know for me that was one thing that, it wasn't like I ever felt like no one liked me, but I think that I spent so much time trying to figure out who was real and who was fake in my life, who was, here to stay, who was not, who cared about me enough and wanted to spend time with me versus, somebody just, wanting to check a box, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and then you add that to the societal pressures, it can definitely be very difficult. Um, and growing up, also you're not really taught about a lot of these things. Like, I'm glad that our generation, I feel like, is really changing things a lot, or just, I don't want to say just our generation, but the stigma is being lessened as time goes on. It's a long way to go, but it's changing a lot.
Mhm.
But I feel like even growing up in the 2090s, I feel like, there still wasn't a lot of conversations about mental health or the effect it could really have on people. Um, yeah, I know when I started struggling with anxiety, I was just told, oh, it's just butterflies. You'll be fine. You'll get through it. And I get that people mean well when they say that, but sometimes it comes off as very passive.
Mhm.
And I don't really like passive conversation. I don't like people saying, oh, it's fine. You'll get, because I feel like you're not acknowledging the reality of what I'm dealing with.
Well, you know what that's called? It's called toxic positivity.
That
And
that that
it's
is toxic positivity. Yeah.
yeah, and it's basically where you're not necessarily allowed to be human or vocalize the realities of maybe your particular experience without someone being like, well, at least XYZ, or just smile, or just be positive, or just
Right.
think positive, or you know what, it could be worse. Like, all of those things are unhelpful, and it teaches people to suppress the parts of our human nature that allow us to process those emotions so we can get to the other side. And when you suppress those emotions, you never get to the other side. So you have generations and generations of people who have lived with toxic positivity and suppress those emotions. And, we're seeing the ramifications of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just, I mean, I'm thankful that finally I took the initiative to get help and to really work through my emotions. But it took a lot of healing. It took a lot of self awareness too, and realizing that, um, I could only help myself. Yeah, my family means well, my friends mean well, but in the end, I can only help myself, and that was what I had to realize. And it took a while. It took me stepping outside of my comfort zone. And sometimes one thing, mental health struggles would do, at least for me, was make me feel alone. Even though you know you're not alone and dealing with anxiety and dealing with depression like I did, but and so do at times, but it'll make you feel like you're alone, make you feel like nobody understands you, and but in all reality, you're not. But it really takes stepping outside and saying, hey, this is the help that I need, But I mean, I also like when people were like, go get help already. Because I mean, people need to do that in their own time as well. Um, y'all don't want people to suffer, but it takes people time to get to that point sometimes. So that's one thing I've learned. But what's your mental health journey been like?
So when I'll kind of take it scenario by scenario. So if we're specifically just talking about my specific vision impairment, um, it took a series of steps, and it's a journey. So it's not like you arrive in the sense. I don't believe we ever arrive until we're in the ground. So
Right.
while we're here, we're designed to be impactful as we can be, just as we are. So for me, having a vision impairment, growing up as a Black African American woman with albinism, all of those things are difficult, right? Because you deal with um, coming, at least for me, coming from a lower social economic status. So a lot of that entails a lot of lack of access to resources. Um, so a lot of things or benefits I didn't find out until much later. Um,
Mm,
so a lot of the supports that people, comparatively have received, in addition to myself, I wasn't exposed to those early on. And I think being exposed to those like different community programs, maybe camps or whatnot, that would have been really beneficial for me to help me not feel so isolated in being visually impaired. Because when you feel like you're the only one, it further perpetuates things like anxiety and depression. And a lot of times, the feeling of being the only one, that's anxiety's way of telling us or magnifying something, whether it's that size or not. And for me, um, you know, managing my expectations of myself, I think, is the most important thing that I've
mm,
kind of been learning. So being able to say, okay, Maya, you don't need to compare yourself to person X, Y, or Z. Um, because that one, they don't have a disability. Second of
right.
all, um, the ways that I've had to adapt make my way of maneuvering the circumstances I'm in very unique. So just trying to get the internal ableism out of my system that tells me I have to check these boxes in a certain time frame, and the
Mm,
part of me that puts that much more pressure on myself because I have disabilities. So navigating that, so it's been a journey, and I think
yeah.
as we get older and experience new things, things may change, but I think having the tools through having gone through therapy and navigating therapy, and having the tools of community have really helped me along the way.
I completely, so much you said there, and I completely agree with everything you said there. And I definitely feel like that's also one of my biggest issues, and has been for a while, is not comparing myself to others, or just being able to accept where I'm at, you know, and also be proud of, not like a toxic positivity way that we were talking about earlier, but be proud of my accomplishments, be proud of how far I have come. So I think sometimes you can get so caught up in, I haven't done this yet, or I haven't, for example, I see a lot of my friends getting married now, and they're having children now. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? There were times where I was like, but I'm only 25. A lot of people don't even get married to their 30s. But I'm looking at half of my circle. I guess I'm just attractive, a more mature circle, and they're already married by 22, 23 years old. So I'm like, oh, what am I doing? But I had to remind myself that that's their journey and this is your journey. And in a way, I've learned to appreciate myself and accept where I'm at and be happy with where I'm at. And especially, not I'm not one of the people that likes to blame social media and everything on social media. And but sometimes I feel like, yeah, you know what I mean. Just being on there, it's like you see people with all these functions and these excursions and things like that. You're like, what am I doing with my life? But then you have to remind yourself. And I've had friends tell me like, hey, don't do that, because to be honest, it's not really. Even when you see that, you have to remind yourself time again, it's a highlight reel. You don't know
Hmm.
what those people are really going through. You don't know what they're experiencing. And you don't even know that excursion they're on is even all that fun. They may just be posting it, making it look fun, but it may not really be all that. And that more often, that's actually what I've been told.
Hmm.
So it's really caused me to check myself at the door and say, hey, um, be grateful, but also, accept where you're at, and also advocate for yourself. If you want something, if you want to get somewhere, advocate for that. And that's actually one thing that I kind of had a bit of an epiphany, a bit of a moment a couple weeks
Mm-hmm.
ago, because I was going through one of my little phases. And actually, Maya and I talked. We were actually supposed to record this recently, but we were kind of having moments. And Maya and I were talking, and I said I kind of had in a moment of clarity because I was going through one of my phases where it seemed like everybody was doing something with their life, and I said, well, what if I actually was more expressive about what I wanted? What if I advocated? What if I said, hey, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. Because I think sometimes I get caught up in being a people pleaser and not, I don't want to say putting my foot down, but not always being firm, even as an advocate in, hey, I want to achieve this. I want to, and I had to ask myself, am I making the effort? Yes, I have a disability. Yes, it might be more difficult. But what if I maybe just tried to make the effort to try to get to that place or go to that excursion or whatnot? And I don't know, really changed my outlook. And granted, that doesn't, it's not going to be magic. It's not going to just turn everything into gold all of a sudden. But I think it would at least give me an outlook of empowerment and of confidence. And I'm happy with that moment of clarity that I had. And it was a great moment even for my mental health. But like I said, it's my mindset as well. It's definitely a journey. It's definitely something that it varies from day to day. But I'm thankful I have the
Mm-hmm.
tools, and I'm thankful that I have the self empowerment myself to recognize where I'm at, be appreciative where I'm at, and yes, maybe try to get to the place where I want to be, but be okay with the journey, however slow or fast it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so good. And I just want to kind of go back to your point about social media because I think it's important. I For those who don't know, I am on social media but as a content creator. So I do something that what's called creating content that serves. And so I believe like anything, whether it be social media, whether it be your time, I believe those things are tools. And
Right,
it's really comes down to intention. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you utilizing that tool the way that you are? Because if you use it out of its purpose, then you're going to get negative ramifications and results. And so for me, I've had to be intentional um, that unless I'm posting or unless I'm supporting, people in my circle of advocacy or friends or family, I'm not really on social media like that. I may
right,
comment or reply or share things again from my circle, but I'm intentional. I'm literally on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube as far as social media goes. And that's because one, the toxicity of Facebook.
no,
I
don't
just
get me
couldn't
started.
I couldn't deal with it anymore. TikTok
Yeah,
is becoming more toxic. And I think anything in life has the potential to become toxic if it is not utilized properly and if the people utilizing it don't know their limits. And so what happens is people get on social media and everybody can be an expert, whether they really are or not. And so I don't talk about things that I don't know about, but I
right,
also am intentional about not spending more time on a screen than I am in the real world. Now, granted, with people with disabilities, the online community can be really beneficial. And so I don't want to make it seem like it's all bad because it's not. There's a lot of
absolutely,
there's so much more good for every negative thing you could say.
absolutely,
Um Especially when you have a disability and you're dealing with isolation, depression, and anxiety, seeing a community of people who are living with what you're living with, like, do you know what that does? It confirms, one, I'm not alone. I don't got to
right,
um feel like I'm on an island. Two, it kind of encourages you because you're seeing other people share their experience. And a lot of times, what people don't realize is when you share your experience, especially with chronic illness and disability, it has a way of providing some healing in your own journey. Like being able to vocalize what you've struggled with shows that you've acknowledged it, that you're growing, and that you're embarking on that journey. And being able to communicate that to other people, that's a beautiful thing. and it shows growth. And so from a mental health standpoint, I think a lot of it is about intentionality. Even if we look at being offline, like how we spend our time. Are we spending our time with friends? Are we able to spend our time with friends? Are we vocalizing the loneliness that we're experiencing? Because if we're not vocalizing it, then people don't know. You know, you can feel loneliness in a crowded room or a house full of people. And so being able to say, you know what, so and so, someone that you trust, like, I'm lonely, or today I feel like I'm struggling with feeling less than because I'm struggling to find a job, or
Yes.
today I'm frustrated because I can't get access to this thing, and it seems like it should be so simple, but it's not. Like, it's okay to vocalize that with someone you trust, and it helps bring healing because you're putting it out there and you're acknowledging it. And a lot of times we get put into this box by toxic positivity, unfortunately, where
Yes.
if just because we're vocalizing it, people presume we're complaining.
Right.
And that's not the case. Complaining is bringing something up, oftentimes in a nagging connotation, and reiterating it with the intention to kind of regurgitate on someone in negative capacity. Whereas vocalizing and being honest about what you're going through, that should be a moment of intimacy within a relationship where you're able to be your truest self. And it's not that you're complaining, but you're letting your guard down so that other person or that group of people can see who you really are and love you for who you really are.
Right. That wow. You always say so many things. It's just you know you think of so many things, but I really love what you said there about vocalizing and also I love what you said about intentionality. And I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about that, about how I feel like because of my journey and where I've gotten to, I feel like I wouldn't be doing a service or fulfilling my purpose if I didn't pass that journey once other or pass that knowledge of healing that I've learned once other people. And that's why I made it. Even just the job that I do and interacting with the youth that I do, I really make it a mission to make sure they're good, they're okay, that their mental health is good, their emotional health is good, and that they feel great and they feel empowered. And so I'm not above having a conversation and passing that on to them, because I know how it feels to be trapped, to be stuck or to feel like you're alone. um and I think what that word vocalize, I feel like there's nothing else that we share today. I feel like that's the biggest I might disagree, but I feel like that's the biggest word of the day is vocalize. No matter what,
Mm-hmm.
just vocalize. And one thing I've learned, it can be very difficult. So I definitely don't want to put anyone listening in a position where you feel like I gotta, speak out today. I gotta do this today.
Mm-mm.
You should, but it should be your your journey. Trust me, it took me time to speak out too. It took me a lot of time, and because I felt like, and especially growing up, especially being a man, you're taught, especially by a lot of people, that you can't be vulnerable. You can't let your guard down. You're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to be emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And it, even though I knew better, it took me years to really put that knowing into action. I feel like only
Yeah.
recently I've learned that it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be honest with how you feel. And the more that I've been able to do that, the more actually people have been receptive of that, and people have said, "Hey, what can I do to help? What can I do to, help you get to that place where you're happy?" Or they, at the least, they give me options on how I could achieve that, how I could reach that place. Even if
Mm-hmm.
they can't physically themselves help me, they at the least tell me, "Hey, I may not be able to help you right now, but here's something that I think will." And I appreciate that. I don't feel like anybody owes me anything, but
Mm-hmm.
if I can at least put myself out there to them and vocalize my struggles and how I'm feeling, I feel like I'm accomplished. And like I said, more often, I mean, sure, every now and then you get one of those toxic positive, but even then, I don't blame them, because they're just trying to help, but they don't know how to, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But I'm thankful that the more I've done that, the more people have actually been receptive of that and said, "Hey, let me try to help you. Let me try to get you to the places you need to be." But
Yeah.
like I said, if you learn nothing else, they vocalize. Just be honest with yourself, be honest with others, and you never know who might be there on their journey to help you along the way. Because I don't think any of us are, made to walk this journey alone, and I don't think
Mm-mm.
any of us will walk this journey alone. So, um, you're definitely being vocal, and so I love what you said there.
Yeah, and on that note, as we get ready to kind of head on out,
Yeah,
um, I just want to say to those listening, if your mental health is something that you need assistance in developing tools to manage, therapy is always a great resource, and community is always a great resource, which is something that the ECAC has always been great about helping to facilitate. And on that note, Billy, I'm turning it over to you as we get ready to sign off.
yeah. Thank you. And like Maya said, definitely looking to tap into your resources. Definitely talk to somebody. Therapy is a great resource. We're always here at ECAC. So definitely reach out. And speaking of ECAC, we're thankful for, like I said, we're thankful for them allowing us the platform to be able to do this podcast and share our stories. And remember to like and subscribe and follow our go on our website, check out everything we have uh, at ECAC. And with that being said, remember to shine. Remember to always be kind. And from myself and Maya and all of us at ECAC, we will see you next time.